up guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're gonna be watching this Luxin video. So who actually was Moebius A anyway? Now I will talk about the video and my thoughts on it before we begin, but first of all I do want to mention that I'm feeling a little bit tired today. I've been working on a lot of videos because on Friday and Saturday I'm gonna be really busy. Like on Friday you have to go to the doctor for my brother and I have to explain to them that how I think he has ADHD. We're going to be getting new phones on Saturday. So yeah, I'm recording a whole bunch of videos in advance and I just want an easy video to do right now. But yeah, that's why I'm feeling a bit tired. So I need a bit of a pick-me-up. So we're going to be watching this Luxin video that I haven't watched. It's been out for 3 weeks and I haven't watched it yet. So my thoughts on this is I don't think there actually is a Moebius A. I think because Z created all the Moebiuses except for A because he saw Alvis as like a Moebius like honorary one. So I don't think there is technically a Moebius A, but I guess we'll see what he thinks. So yeah, let's just get right into it.
This video will contain spoilers for Xenoblade 3 and the future Deep DLC, and by extension Xenoblade 1 and 2 as well, though I won't be directly talking about those games a lot. Alright, we really just kinda need to talk about this at this point. Like, when we saw there was no Moebius A present in the base game of Xenoblade 3, we figured that it was going to be saved for DLC.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Then we got Ino's DLC, and it was about a bird. Then we got Masha's DLC, and it was about rocks. So we figured it's gonna be part of the story DLC. There's a good chance we're getting Founders at this point. Then we got the Founder Story DLC, and there was no character named Moebius A. And yet, we know there must have been a Moebius A to some degree. So what exactly are we supposed to do about that? At this point, I don't think I'm even going to try to go for a definitive answer, just discuss all the different possibilities and let you choose for yourself, because really by now it doesn't really matter, and it's just up to your own personal interpretation of what exactly Moebius is that determines whether you would consider A to even exist at all. First up though, how do we know there was actually a Moebius A and they didn't just kind of choose to skip that letter? Well, this is a fairly obscure piece of NPC dialogue, but you can have confirmation that Zed at the very least told the other Moebius that there was an A. I don't know what exactly triggers it, but there is explicit NPC dialogue for this. After completing Fiona's hero quest and probably resolving more elements of the Colony Mu story, and at the very least recruiting Triton, if not completing his quest as well, you can talk to the NPC in Colony Mu named Shu, who will say, I found some information about the consoles while digging around in Irma's hideout. Keep in mind, Irma's hideout is a location you can actually visit in-game, but that will not be there. There are other things you can look at and get a little bit more information about who Irma was, but this console list is exclusive to Shu's dialogue. Tyon will ask what the list said, and Shu will then respond. According to the data, there are 26 people altogether, but T's name was crossed out. Next to it was a scribble that says Stupid Head. Irma was already one of the more sympathetic consuls to the party, and because Lanz gets roasted by Triton constantly, he will sympathize with her even further after reading that. So, we know that at the very least, Irma, who, as far as we can tell, is just a completely regular consul and member of Moebius, who doesn't have any special roles and is just dealing with colonies, was under the impression that there were 26 Moebius, at least at some point in time. Since we also know that the Moebius lettering explicitly uses the English version of the Latin alphabet, that is, there's no consul Enye, we can assume that this missing Moebius was in fact Moebius A and not just some other letter. We obviously know Moebius get replaced, but that doesn't happen to any of the ones we kill during the main game.
For simplicity's sake, I'm going to treat all the 25 Moebius from the main game as if they get killed when that's not the case for T and
25 of them, meaning that A is the one left over. And because A is the opposite of Z, this actually means something, and it's not just a case of them choosing not to use a specific letter for whatever reason. If it was any other letter of the alphabet besides A, I would have operated under one specific assumption that could very easily still be true, but isn't likely given the other context. And that assumption is, there exist colonies in the world, a very large amount of them, that cannot be liberated by the party during the main story. somebody had to be overseeing those colonies. We do know that consuls can oversee multiple colonies and can work for both nations at the same time because they're controlling the entire war. Of course they would do that. But depending on how much side content you do, it's possible that by the time you enter Origin, the only consuls that you can kill during the game that have not been beaten yet are N, X, Y, and Z. And those don't really seem to be the type of people who would be on the ground, boots in, walking up to it Faranis, telling the commander what to do. So maybe that missing Moebius...
Barring Y's direct control over Colony Omega, obviously.
...is just overseeing all of the other colonies, and they made sure one will stay alive no matter what, just so there's a plausible reason for non-liberated colonies to still be functioning. If this was Q, I would believe that. But it's A, so I'm gonna have to get conspiratorial with this. There are quite a lot of options for that, though. Probably the most boring one is that the city is more than capable of killing a few Moebius, even without an active Ouroboros team tied to a stone and capable of interlinking. So maybe some other colony they attacked at some point was overseen by Consul A, and they killed Consul A there, and they just hadn't been replaced by the time the main game starts. Because obviously, up through Chapter 5 takes place in a couple months before Mio dies. So it would make perfect sense, because Colony Mu's been going for a few years, that Irma was made a Moebius. There was an A at the time, so she had that written down. That A was killed by the city or some other something going on.
That's possible,
but had
I
not
think.
been replaced by the time the game starts. Again, very
when I said about Alvis, Alpha, A, you know.
No one in the city to talk about that actually happens in the game, except for the fact that it's Consul A, so I don't think it would be something so mundane as that. There's also the fact that there is just enough ambiguity to make things interesting, because this is Irma's list of consuls. It's not necessarily a list of ones she's met, just a list of ones she knows exists. We don't know if it's Moebius standard issue or anything like that. It could have just been something she wrote down herself. We know she wrote the stupid head comment about Triton, but she could have made the entire list on her own. I made a list of the different consuls as I was playing through the game, keeping track of what they had been responsible for and when they died and stuff like that, as well as their true name, if we actually learned that at any point. So she could have literally just been taking notes on a lecture given to her by Zed. We have no idea which other consuls she actually met. She most likely met at least one of X, Y, and Z, because it seems like you need to talk to a true Moebius in order to become a dead person Moebius. And it seems like you just need to talk to Zed himself for the most part. Maybe Shania exclusively went through X. That's the only one I'm not sure about. But even then, she went to Origin and then came back to attack the city in side story Not Senna. So she probably didn't
I still love that people call
too.
it that.
And Irma was responsible for an Agnian colony. It looks like she spent most of her time there, so she might not have even had a Kavesi colony or other Agnian colonies to work with, which means she probably reported directly to M. And the stupid head comment exists, which means Colony Mu and Triton's colony probably had some sort of rivalry, or she at least knew Triton, because they operate in the same area. It would make sense that they'd run into each other at some point. So that's a very, very restrictive list of ones that she definitely actually met. The rest of them could have just been from hearsay from other characters. And this opens up the possibility that Zed is lying to the majority of Moebius about A existing. Why would she even do that? Well, you'd think it might be about A from Future Redeemed, but I don't really know if you could say that Zed and A directly met each other. So it's not a sign of respect or anything like that. At least towards A, the character from Future Redeemed.
But maybe Alvis?
But Zed is the embodiment of humans' fear and uncertainty. And because of that, I think there's a good reason he would not want to have a Moebius in the same seat that would have been occupied by Alpha. Now, if we're going with the idea that A isn't filled because Zed considers that seat to eternally be occupied by Alpha, why wouldn't it be out of deference? Zed calls Alpha his god in the opening of Future Redeemed. And it is understandable why he would think so. Alpha is an immensely powerful individual, also formed out of people's emotions, and is Ontos. And Zed came out of the emotions of people in Origin, which was built off of Ontos. So even if it's in an indirect way, Alpha could be considered as a creator or predecessor to Moebius.
Yeah.
This would even work.
That's how I figured it was.
Like, you would have Alpha at the beginning, Zed at the end. Zed is the king of Moebius, and Alpha is the god of Moebius.
Huh.
That would make sense, except for the part where Alpha isn't particularly a generous god, and I don't think Zed views him in a particularly high regard, even at the beginning of Future Redeemed. Because, you know, Zed is already actively teaming up with the Liberators to try and oust Alpha, and after that fight, Shulk and Rex both got maimed, but Zed had his powers sealed and was trapped in Origin for the remainder of the time Alpha was alive, and even after that, he never left Origin, as far as we know, for another 1,000 years until he finally got beaten by the party in the main game. So I think he somehow ended up even worse out of that. Then, there is also the fact that Alpha and Zed do not have anything resembling the same plan. Alpha wants to destroy Ionios right away, as opposed to the Liberators, who want to allow Ionios to be freed by people from Ionios, and Zed, who wants it to last forever.
Yeah.
So I don't think he would want an eternally occupied seat in his organization to even be represented by someone who just doesn't agree with him. So
even though he did technically create them in a
Let's
way.
think of other emotions that are sometimes applied towards God that might also go alongside Moebius. What's another common phrase? Maybe God-fearing? Well, Zed is the embodiment of fear, and let's see what kind of happened to him when he encountered his god in Alpha. He could not beat Alpha, even with the help of Shulk and Rex. Then he got sent under house arrest, and was so scared of going outside after that defeat that even when he became free, he raised a bunch of dead people to go outside and manipulate the world for him. I think Zed was pretty scared of Alpha. I would, though, also just like to talk a little bit more about why it probably isn't A, because with the exception of X, Y, and Z, who are the true Moebius, all of the console's letters are just the first letter of their name.
Yeah.
And A's name was already A since coming into existence. That A doesn't actually stand for Alpha or Alvis, it just means one who was there from the beginning. Granted, Alpha is very obviously the first letter in a different writing system. In fact, one of the letters that gave us the term alphabet in the first place, but it starts with an A when written in the writing system that all of the other Moebius names are based off of. We'd be having a different conversation if Zed was named Omega, but he's named Zed, so we have to think English Latin alphabet, and in that writing system, it takes 5 letters to write out the name Alpha. To add to that, Agnian colonies are all named after Greek letters, and yeah, there is no colony Alpha. Granted, we don't see most colony letters, and we definitely don't see most colony numbers, because we know that Keves goes up to colony 30, and we only see 7 numbered Kevesi colonies in the game, and that's including 0, so we're missing a lot of both the numbers and letters, but there is no Alpha, and that is still an objective fact that remains. I don't think this really means anything, but the lowest numbered Kevesi colony we get, besides 0 again, is colony 4. That is 3 places away from colony 1, the mysterious origin original Kevesi Faranis, or whatever. On the Agnian side, we get colony Gamma, Gamma being the 3rd Greek letter, so that's only 2 places away from Alpha, but we still don't see Alpha itself. I don't think that means anything, but hey, it might. As another aside that definitely doesn't have anything to do with this video,
Xenoblade makes my head hurt sometimes.
Were intentionally made with Greek letters to have synergy with Alpha from Future Redeemed. I think the intended association was different. Because if you're thinking about this kind of thing, obviously you're going to give the Kevesi colonies numbers, because that's what the Homs colonies already did in Xenoblade 1, and that's the Xenoblade 1 country. Then, you are giving Moebius letters based on the English-Latin alphabet, because characters' names are going to be conceptualized in English in a lot of cases, and then turned back into Japanese for the purpose of the original Japanese script. So in order to kind of bridge that, you do it in another country, but you might also want to use an alphabet for it. Considering Greek letters are frequently used for variables alongside numbers in mathematical equations, if you take 3 things together, that being letters, Greek letters, and numbers, you kind of get the full language of math there, and I guess math is canon to Xenoblade, but that doesn't have to do with Alpha. Now, we need to address the one possibility that I'm sure half of you have been screaming at me in the comments about the entire time, and I totally intentionally saved for this late into the video to drive up engagement. And that is the idea that Moebius A is actually Ionios itself.
Oh, yeah.
This is a very compelling and interesting idea, and even thematically, it would work a lot with comparing A to Z, but I just don't think this is the case. Ionios is a fundamentally different kind of existence than any of the Moebius, and also, it's just not sentient.
Yeah.
Moebius aren't just living things, they are sapient beings. All of the consoles are at the very least. I would argue even Alpha is, if you want to count Alpha as a Moebius. And while the jury's still kind of out on what the Scrabs themselves are, it seems like they're formed from Moebius energy from people just like the full Moebius are, so turning a place into a Moebius? I don't really know about that. Don't get me wrong, Zed has a lot of stocks in Ionios as a world, and I think it would be reasonably within character for him to elevate it to such a level of importance as another member of his organization, and even as the one mirroring himself, because, N and M being the middle of the alphabet is clearly very important. However, I see no reason for him to lie to the other Moebius and say that Console A is a person and an actual console if that were the case. All of the Moebius care about Ionios persisting as it is and want it to stay the exact same forever. You have to buy into the Endless now to become Moebius in the first place. So I see zero reason for him to lie to Irma and be like, ah yes, there's a Console A who you've not gotten to meet yet, instead of saying the position of A in our order is taken by Ionios itself, the world that we made our own, or something along those lines. If we didn't have the list, I would completely buy that A was Ionios, but we do, and that just would make a whole lot of sense. Like, I also get why Shu wouldn't say anything about the original names of the other Moebius, because they're not relevant to him.
Yeah.
The only other one he might have met at all would have been Triton anyway. But if A said Ionios next to it in Irma's list, I'm pretty sure he would have said something there as well. So, unfortunately, I just don't think this is the
he might have been like,
one
what
of the other options just is the truth. As I said earlier, at this point, it really doesn't matter which of the options that I didn't explicitly discount in the video ends up being true, because the symbolism of there being an A and a Z is kind of the thing that matters the most at this point, because, beginning and the end, the first and the last, and A from Future Deemed is not Moebius, and the one-letter name comes from something else, that character is still thematically the A to counteract Z, because A is the beginning, and by the end of Future Redeemed, is the only character still around who was there for the birth of a universe when Klaus created the worlds of Xenoblade 1 and 2, whereas Zed, as Moebius, only came into existence in the first place at the end of those two worlds when they intersected and Origin was controlled by Moebing energy. So that dichotomy exists. A never directly meets or fights Zed, but is instrumental into his eventual downfall, though I guess N kind of helped with that because he unlocked Ouroboros, but you know what I mean. That thematic stuff is still there, so honestly, the Console A position doesn't really matter as much, and there are several reasonable explanations that can't be debunked at all that could go as for why we don't explicitly see that console. However, they could still be saving Console A for something else, and it wasn't even a long game for the DLC, it was a long game for a future game.
Oh my god.
And that really, I think, is the only time where the express identity of Console A and not Future Redeemed Ontos A actually would matter. You know how I brought up the symbolism of A being the beginning and Z being the end earlier? Well, that's not just a reference to a line in Xenoblade 1 that's similar to that. It's also a reference to one of the most important Bible verses for the entire Xeno series. Revelation 22:13. The first words you see when opening a new game of Xenogears. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. So, why was Zed the first Moebius if he's the last letter of the alphabet? If you think about it, Moebius kind of went backwards. Zed was the first one, then he made X and Y as his avatars, And then he started filling out the rest of the alphabet with dead soldiers and citizens of Ionios. So it would be so easy to just say, okay, Alpha is Moebius A because Alpha came last, and if we're going backwards, then the beginning should be the end, and then bing bang boom, we're done. However, there were a lot of people raised to the rank of Moebius after Alpha was vanquished, and none of them were Moebius A as far as we can tell. Like, just from people the main cast of Xenoblade 3 knew in their 9 terms of life, we got a console C, a console J, and a console S. So Moebius does get replaced at a relatively fast rate, so there's really no way for Alpha Future Redeemed to have been the last Moebius to invert the whole beginning thing, because as I discussed the other day, Moebius is kind of an inversion of the Trinity processor already, so it would kind of make sense for them to invert Alpha and Omega. Which means that there is a small possibility that the true Moebius A, the last Moebius, has not been seen at all yet, because they have not yet come into existence. Zed and the Endless Now might have been destroyed, and Origin might have been working properly, but the emotions that gave rise to Moebius can't be defeated that easily. Moebius was formed from the sum total emotions of everyone in Origin, and from what we can tell, the people on the ground in Ionios, barring just the 2 queens and any other avatars like Shulk, Rex, and Riku who managed to make it that far without getting killed within Ionios, every single person who was able to overcome Moebius in the end was the next generation, so to speak. That is, children and souls from the future in the form of the people of the city. Which means there's a lot of older generation who might still harbor those thoughts, and might still be scared of the 2 worlds interlinking, as we might have seen at the end of Future Redeemed, or something like that. Now, without Origin holding everyone's souls as a catalyst, it would be harder for Moebius energy to coalesce into an actual being, but also, without Origin, we might not have things like Ouroboros to counteract that Moebius, if one does eventually arise. Xeno does racism plots a lot. Like, Xenoblade 3 is probably the one game in the series, assuming you count all of Saga as one thing, that doesn't really touch on it a lot, just because of the way its world is structured. There just is no racial or cultural barrier between anyone within the nations, and people are just more interested in physical differences in each other, even across nations, just as a curiosity, because people don't all look the same. Also, I guess because of a thing like hatred needs to be taught, and children are all innocent, and they're just going to be more interested in differences than worried about them. But I could very easily see them kind of go back to that well, and if they wanted to use Moebius one more time for a future game, do something like the final Moebius, Moebius A, the last ditch effort of that sort of negative emotional energy latching on to xenophobia from people who don't want to be forced together with people from another world after the worlds interlink.
That's possible.
And that caused a whole big deal in the future.
So I doubt we will see Moebius again.
Why would they want to use Moebius again in a future game after the mixed reception it received, even from people who liked Xenoblade 3?
Yeah, that's true.
Well, if the certain characters I think are going to show up in the next Xenoblade game do in fact make an appearance, something like Moebius, especially something true Moebius tier, like the last vestiges, someone who, despite the Endless Now no longer existing, trying to finish the job that Zed started and keep the worlds as they always were, would be a very good jobber to show just the kind of power set and capabilities those characters might have. I don't think they'll actually do that, but there is a small chance, among all of the other things I talked about, that they saved Moebius A to be the last Moebius for something like that as well. Till next time, which is probably not going to be as long as that game being announced, but you never know with my inconsistent upload schedule. This is Luxin, signing off.
So yeah, really enjoyed this video. Very interesting discussion from Luxin. Honestly, I think the simplest answer is just that it has something to do with Alpha, Alvis, A. Funny headcanon is that no one that had a name that started with the letter A wanted to become Moebius. And the whole naming thing is just funny. Better luck next time. See, sorry, no, I have an opening for Moebius M, but not N, so we'll take me and let you go. My theory is that Moebius A was Adam holding himself. So he prevents from being reduced to a Nopon in Xenoblade 2. Okay, that's kind of funny. That would be kind of funny. I just wish Nopon could have been Moebius, or we could have seen Moebius be two Banner, yeah, stacked on top of each other. Moebius B and B, come on, this has to be. Yeah, that would have been really cool. Oh my god. I just assume that since he saw Alvis, thus Alpha, as his god, he never set anyone as a sign of respect. I never knew that there were 26 people line. People always ask who is Moebius A, but never how is Moebius A. Might be. Let's be real. Zio's afraid of Alpha so much that he refuses to have A in his organization is raw. Seeing as Z is already the embodiment of fear, I think I found my head. Actually, that does make sense, you know. I think A's full quote, it has the nuance of the one at the beginning in this world. Only I and F could claim that honor. I think this also necessitates that obviously doesn't actually exist. It almost sounds as if A is describing something. Fundamental law of Ionios in this code, which means it will be more curious, but it will be a list of all the most including where he said math is canon. I still think A being the theoretical missing A makes sense. They tell method directly. A just means beginning. I took that doing the replacement origin programming. I could just picture that. I was saying about the naming thing, asking about A being told A is occupied, and just assuming that man, the Moebius had a title if we get deeper into the weeds, both mechanical. Okay. But yeah, that makes sense. Honestly, I think that's the simplest option. This guy has a lot of things to say. If Z did go in reverse order, it would be funny if he purposely stopped before doing it. Well, this A because reaching A means reaching an N, and as we all know, he is allergic. That would be kind of funny. One reminder of his greatest enemy, or an opposite to himself, would be a threat. Powering origin is what allows for the creation and continued existence of Ionios through Moebius will. In this instance, can refer to A, alpha, all simultaneously. Yeah, I agree. I think the simplest option is the most likeliest. I do kind of like that idea of maybe Z going backwards and like picking people, but purposely stopping at A, or maybe A wasn't just created yet. And then A could show up in like a future Xenoblade thing. Though I don't think that's the way they'll go. Again, especially with he mentioned about how hacking people didn't really like Moebius, myself included. I've grown to like Moebius more. Like I liked it as a concept originally, but I thought the execution wasn't the best. But I grew to like it more. I really love the concept now, and I more appreciate the execution, even though I still have issues with it. So I don't think they would go back to the Moebius well, though, you know. They were able to turn things that people hated about, like Xenoblade 2, for example, and turn things to people they loved, at least for some people, and they grew more attached to Xenoblade 2 because of Xenoblade 3. So there's different options, but yeah, I think the most likely thing is that Alpha, Alvis, A kind of embody Moebius A because Z viewed them as a god, and even though they had different ideas of how to do Ionios, how to recreate the world or whatever, he still was respectful and to some extent fearful for them, so he kept Moebius A not technically occupied because he saw it as it technically was occupied to some extent. So that's just my personal opinion, but you know, anything can happen, I guess. You know, we could get in Moebius A come back for Xenoblade 4, I don't know, but yeah, guys, I think that's gonna be it for the video. Hope you enjoyed. Yeah, I really enjoyed watching this video. It kind of cleared my head a little bit. There's also this other Luxin video I need to watch. I'll probably just watch that on my own because it's meant to be like a funny haha video for Halloween, even though it was uploaded the day after. But yeah, I think that's gonna be it, guys. Thank you, Damien Grace, for becoming a Patreon member. Like, subscribe, play some Xenoblade, and I'll catch you guys next time for more. Peace, and also link to the original video in the description. Bye.